the Black & Decker Workmate. These things have been around for years. I've had several of them. I think I picked this one up for like $5 at a garage sale. They're great to have, even in a serious shot. They're portable, they're flexible, you can do a lot of stuff with them. But they've got a downside. They're a little bit flimsy. They shake. You can see the top deforming under some weight. They can get a little shaky. So I'm going to show you how I beef mine up. Make them a little more industrial strength and make them kind of into a serious shop tool without giving up their virtues. So first, let's look at some of the good things that we want to keep. Okay, first and foremost, it's portable. It folds up, relatively light, easy to take on the job site. We don't want to give that up, so we need to maintain the portability. Second thing is it's relatively flat. So it fits in a lot of places in your truck or on the job site. So we don't want to make it any wider this way. So we're going to keep everything in the existing profile. Zooming in, there's several features on the top that we want to preserve. One is these two lead screws can move the jaw, the movable jaw, independently. So you don't have to clamp. They can be parallel, they can be skewed. That helps a lot for clamping weird shapes. Second thing is these grooves. There's grooves on those fixed jaw and on the movable jaw for clamping round material. So you can clamp a piece of tubing like so, very effectively. Third thing is there's grooves to hold round material vertically, like that. Third thing, or fourth thing, is these dog holes. So these movable dogs are very handy. You can rearrange them in lots of different orientations. So we want to keep all the dog holes. So here we are in folded up mode again. And the key to getting rid of the shakiness is to cross brace it, to X brace it. But when we're folded up, you can see that this set of legs, which you might call the back set, the front being the side with the screw cranks on it, is inside of these legs. So our diagonal bracing will have to take place on the back set of legs. That's going to be the first thing we do. Okay, next thing, we're coming in close and we're looking right down the leg. And you can see we've got these plastic wing nuts and a bolt that tension the legs to this crossbar. So that carriage bolt tightens the horizontal table frame to the leg. So we're going to strengthen that up. And then the table itself is just a piece of roughly 3/4 inch bamboo, which is okay for a lot of stuff, but for what I use it for, it's a little bit weak. So we're going to beef that up. Okay, for the diagonal bracing, pretty straightforward. I got a piece of 1/2 inch conduit and I flattened the ends of it out in my vise and I bent them over at about a 45-degree angle or thereabouts. Then that's going to run this way. So to attach it, I'm going to remove the upper screw from this cross member and I'm going to drill a hole and run a bolt and screw through this leg. I don't like drilling holes in things, but this is trapped between two pins that are not removable or not easily removable. So I'm going to drill a hole right about here and then attach this cross brace. Looking at the bottom cross member now, you can see the foot pad here. So I took this upper screw out of these two screws, and I took my handy dandy old and gray snap-on pry bar and just pried that ear away from the leg. So just enough to get my conduit in there. And then I drilled a hole right there all the way through the leg. Okay, I took it loose here to get my piece of conduit started and get the holes aligned. There you go. Using the chopstick to align the holes. And I'll get this one started first. Adding a longer, heavier screw to hold the conduit in. Okay, that screw is now spearing all through there, all the members. Washer. Nut. Okay, the upper screw, I might use a screwdriver as a drift to align these, like so. And I'm going to use a flathead screw because it'll just bury itself into this sheet metal and countersink itself. Okay. Okay, there it is, improvement number 1, and it has made a significant difference in the rigidity of this thing. Improvement number 2, these plastic wing nuts. Okay, these things are great for weekend warrior projects, but when you really got to reef this thing down because you don't want the thing to fold up on you, you don't want this leg to move relative to the table cross member. This plastic wing nut, you can't get a lot of good torque on it, and if you do, you'll crush the tube as you tighten it up. So we're going to beef that up. So it's pretty easy. I'm just going to take out the plastic wing nut, remove the carriage bolt, there's a plastic washer in here you don't want to lose. But we're going to take a steel spacer, this is from the hardware store. Just using our little Tinner's persuader. Align it with the chopstick. Reinstall the carriage bolt. And then we'll install a steel wing nut that we picked up from the hardware store. Okay, now I can really reef this thing down and I won't crush the tube. Another little tiny improvement. This is the hand crank. Normally this just rides up against this sheet metal. I stuck a little washer in there just so it, when you're torquing it down to tighten it up, this crank is not bearing directly against sheet metal, it's bearing against that washer. It gives it a little bit better load distribution. I just pounded out these roll pins, stuck the washer in, stuck the crank back on, and hammered the roll pins back in. Okay, for the flexible top problem, flexible jaws here, we're gonna beef them up with some of this. That's 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/8 angle, and we're gonna put it under the leading and trailing edges on the fixed jaw and the movable jaw. So let's pop this up, see what we got. So these are the shuttles that move back and forth. We need to attach the steel right there. On the fixed jaw, same thing. We need to attach the steel right there. Okay, we'll go an inch, cut it in half. 11, 5 1/2, cut it in half. That'll be 5 screws. Okay, I clamped the angle iron to the top of the jaw, and I'm going to drill the holes through. And I'll just deburr the holes in the angle iron. I'll countersink the holes just enough to bury the heads of these number 10 screws I'm going to be using. For little guide blocks, I just took a hobby saw and a knife and just cut away a little bit of the plastic so that they can sit over the angle iron and still engage the holes. Top reinforcements are in place, and this thing is now hell for stout. Okay, one more point we can strengthen up. You can see the diagonal brace on the rear leg assembly. Here's the cranks, so that's the front. You can see the diagonal brace on the rear leg assembly. Now if I put a lateral load on it, you can see that that's staying square, but it's deflecting the front leg assembly. You can see it parallelogramming way up on the horizontal cross members. So what you want to look at is right here. This is the piece of sheet metal that makes up the cross member. So as I put load on it, you can see this piece of sheet metal deflecting. So we're gonna beef that up a little bit. I'm gonna make a little reinforcement. It's gonna keep this from flexing out so much. So I just made this out of a piece of Galvy sheet metal that I had laying around. I got another piece. I'll make its twin for the other side. 'Cause, 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 Okay, there we are. 2 installed gussets. I'm putting all my weight on that. You can see the flexing is dramatically reduced. So, a little bit stronger yet. Okay, one last step. The front leg cross bracing. Start the process for the front leg reinforcement by taking loose the cross member. Okay, now I'm going to bend this member down to create room for our cross brace. Okay, I knocked out the pin that was in the pivot point and the hinge point, and I slipped in a 5/16 bolt. So, and I took a piece of 1/2-inch conduit and pounded the end flat. Now, that's one end of our cross brace. The other end of our cross brace is right here, the upper hole. The upper hole where I just bent the inside of the cross member down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to line this up roughly with the leg. Draw a line on it. Now I'm going to bend that this way on that line. Okay, now that that end's in place, I'm going to mark this roughly about like that, so I can then flatten this end of the tube, cut it off, and bend it into place. After a bunch of beating and banging, you end up with some rather ugly looking thing like this, where the ends are skewed to one another. But I'm going to get it in place, get it drilled over here, and then I'll pretty it up a little bit. So step 1, start it on the hinge point, align bolt holes, some screwdriver for a drift there, and then I'm going to tap it in place so that I can see this ear through those holes. Okay, looking around back now, here's the fastener hole in the hole I just drilled. Now I've got to get that ear right there bent back up under the conduit and make sure there's clearance hole all the way through. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, now I just took my Sharpie marker and just marked this excess here, and I'm just gonna take the old grinder and chop it off. I'm getting to be like Div and Fitzy. I reach for the 4-inch grinder to do most of my cutting these days. Okay, here's where some finagling starts. I pounded a 5/16 carriage bolt into the hinge end of the reinforcement bar. So I'm going to pound this out, pop this in, finagle this into place, get all the fasteners going, flip it over, and put on the final attachment on the outside. So here it goes. Okay, now that the bolt is out, our good friend the chopstick, I'm going to realign the plastic spacer, the inner leg and the outer leg. There we are. Okay. So, get this going the right way. Okay, now reinsert the lower end. Get that all lined up. Now for the fasteners. Very last step, here's our new hinge pin, which is the 5/16 carriage bolt. I'm going to put a fender washer on it so it bridges the width of the leg, since I can't put an insert in there. And then I'm going to put it on a crusty old flat washer and a wing nut. So now when I set it up, there's 3 things to tighten. Wing nut's at the top here, and this wing nut here at the hinge pin. There she is, your final embodiment. I'm really pushing on this thing, and it is hell for stout. So, what have we accomplished? We've made this thing a lot more rigid, but we didn't add a lot of weight. This is still pretty light, and she still folds up. Into the same space as it did before. So, still portable. But one hell of a lot stronger. All done, ready for service. Now the reason I did this really, and why I do this to these things, is one thing that really annoys me is workbenches that are either flimsy or loose or move around. You see some guys, their workbench deforms, 5 different ways every time they twist a wrench or pound on it, or they have it on wheels and they're chasing their work all over the shop. I like work surfaces to be strong, rigid, and do their part of the job. Saves a lot of energy, saves a lot of injuries, makes things go a lot quicker, makes your work a lot more repeatable. Well, it's time to move on to the next project. I will see you there and then.